We know it is an absolutely crazy time in terms of buying. Probably safe to say record levels of golf equipment being purchased right now.
This is episode number 81 of No Putts Given. We've got Chris, Harry, and Tony. We're getting it. And guys, right off the top today, I want to tackle some business. We had an article go out earlier this week on a luxury golf watch. We all know Tag Heuer as a luxury watch brand. They're getting into the watch business. But I wanted to gather some opinions. $2,500 for a golf watch. Do you think it's a non-starter?
I don't have $2,500 to go spend on a watch. If it opened my garage, my door, like shut the dog up.
Your garage?
Like, yes, I just don't have that money.
But what if it did, Chris? It's got some awesome features, right? It's getting close. It might be able to open your garage.
It's not just a golf GPS thing. It's a full-on wearable.
The whole dynamics of any luxury market are always so fascinating, right? And they're super predictable because you throw out the price point, right? People can't ignore the price of something. And so right away, that kind of plays on people's, backgrounds and interests and stuff. And you say, oh, $2,500 for a wearable or for a smartwatch or, whatever the case is. Certain people say, I'm not going to pay $2,500 for any watch. It might as well be $1 million. If I don't have, $1,500 for a watch, $2,000 for a watch, $2,500 doesn't make any difference, right? And then you have other people that say, well, they're looking at it in a totally different context and saying, okay, well, compared to other things maybe that I purchase, or if I am a watch person and maybe that's kind of my thing and I have several nice high-end, luxury timepieces. Maybe I've spent $5,000, $10,000, $15,000 on watches, and you're looking at...
As soon as you call it a timepiece...
Yeah, you're in you're an elite class now.
Casio don't make no timepiece.
And the only reason I called it that is because I read the article. I don't often refer to things as timepieces, and for me personally, yeah, I mean, that's not my space. It's not my particular world. I mean, I can't.
You are not fancy.
$2,500, like that's a lot of ice cream. It's a lot of I mean,
yes, Chris, it is a lot of ice cream.
It is. Well, I'd have to just take it straight out of my kid's college fund, and so. But people that are looking at that watch aren't having those same conversations with themselves. Likely, they're not.
Yeah,
it's not this or that. It's not. If I spent $2,500 on this watch, then I can't spend $2,500 on something else.
I wish I was like a watch person. I might be if I was rich. But if I was rich...
You'd call them timepieces.
I would definitely have a golf... Like, it would have... I've got to take my Rolex off to put this Tag Heuer on to go play golf.
But that's it. That's the demographic. These people You got a Rolex or an Omega or, I guess there's, a number of other brands out there. And
if you are living in the Hall of Fame...
You are living with Rory, likely, in Dubai in the Hall of Fame. The two things that are always... commonly held belief are like, oh, that's terrible. Why would you do that? Blah, 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 blah. It's like the existence of higher, more expensive price goods doesn't eliminate the existence of lower price goods. So you don't want to spend $2,500 on a watch.
Still get your Casio.
I mean, you got ShotScope, right? You got Garmin. You have these, you're talking a couple $100. I mean, if you want
Well, hold on. The Garmin, from what I understand, also has an equally expensive luxury golf watch. Correct, Harry?
Last year, we did test a Garmin and a Casio, to throw that in there, which was a huge expense, just like $2,500. And, I mean, dude, it was one of those watches that I was like, I could spend my whole lifetime and not get to every single feature within this watch because it was just unlimited.
But like the base one, like the S62, what does that cost? Like you want a good Garmin?
I think it was like $499, but don't quote me on that. It was upper end of like close to 500.
And I think the second place one, right, ShotScope V3, little over $200 in that area. So I guess the point is that you could have several $5,000 GPS watches. I mean, Rolex could come out with their own. Tag could come out with a more expensive version of that one. It doesn't eliminate all the other options on the market. So the fact that people get so bothered and so worked up about how expensive something else is that somebody else can purchase, I'm like,
Yeah, that is true. A lot of people like don't like the PXG because of their expensive kind of aspect. I was like, well, don't buy it then. If you if you can't afford it, and don't buy it at the end of the day. But now they have like a really good value side.
Well, we keep saying you have to be a watch person in order to appreciate something like this. I might tend to disagree. What if you're just a technology person, or you want to enhance your game? You don't want to have to worry about taking something out that's phone sized, and you're willing to make an investment in that. Do you have to really be a luxury watch person in order to appreciate something like this?
A lot of that, what you say is, if you're a GPS person, you're either a watch person or a handheld. You're not a watch person because you like the handheld version because you can't swing with a watch on. Either you go the watch route or you don't. So it depends. If you're a watch person,
Timepiece.
you're gonna go with a watch 9 times out of 10.
Timepiece. Yeah. I think, Miranda, you're absolutely right. I mean, and I guess PXG is a good analogy for that, because right back, one of the things that Bob Parsons would always say is that, yeah, it's a luxury, but it's an affordable luxury. So if this was something you really wanted, to spend $3,000-$4,000 on a set of irons, it wasn't like, hey, you got one option that's $1,200 and then the next option is $150,000. So it's not like you're going from like a Honda to a Bugatti or something like that. So could you say, yeah, I want to spend, you could buy a laptop, get a really nice laptop, or this Tag Heuer Timepiece watch GPS. So
Well, and there's probably a solid subset of people that would buy it for golf purposes. And then the secondary purposes would be that it is a step tracker or fitness tracker, or Harry opens your garage, or whatever it may be. Those could be secondary reasons to make this investment.
And here's the other part is, if you want to get into that space, right, a lot of the, whether it's, the more fine jewelry approach, and Dave did a good job pointing this out in the article, you look at some of the other models of Tag Heuer watches, they're $6,000, $10,000, $25,000. So if you want a watch that you can wear on the course, it has that name and probably some of those associations, $2,500 is actually a pretty low price point as an entry point into that brand. Right, you're not going to have a lot of Tag Heuer timepieces that are only $2,500. So it gets you into that particular arena as well.
What other stuff did the Tag Heuer do?
It's standard kind of fitness tracking type stuff.
Yeah.
Well, I think there was one, it was either Garmin or Casio last year that they had skydiving, skiing.
That was Garmin.
Was that Garmin?
That was Garmin. Yeah.
That was like, had loads of different sports that you could do. Is the Tag Heuer the same way, or is it just?
Yeah, I don't think it's quite that extensive as far as fitness tracking and those things. But again, because there's a software component, or there's always an opportunity for application-based components. It's a lot easier to update software than it is hardware, right? And so if they wanted to come out with other versions of that and say, okay, now they're going to have their Swiss Chalet series of timepieces, and I don't know, get winter sports in there or whatever. There's clearly a market for it. There's absolutely a market for it, and if you're complaining about it, guess what? You're not in the market for it. They're not that worried about you.
That is funny. That's always one of my favorite responses.
I'm looking at it right now. So it does golf, running, cycling, walking, fitness, other. I don't know what other is. Maybe it is opening your garage door.
Yoga.
But my thinking on something like this, right? If you're in the market for something to use exclusively for golf, unless you really are a connoisseur of fine timepieces, it probably doesn't make sense.
Connoisseur.
But if this is the kind of thing, this is my thought process, right? If this is something you're going to use every day, it's going to be on your wrist constantly, right? It's in that type of scenario, I think it does make sense to spend something.
Yeah, it's timeless.
All right, it's something of not only of higher quality, but that looks nice and has a little bit of class to it. So I can see it. Again, probably not for me. I'm with Chris and in that kind of thinking. But if I was a timepiece guy and I played golf and yeah, I would definitely consider it.
We do love feedback from our readers, and the results of our Golfer's Choice survey are in. Some interesting things to break down, but before we do that, it included 9,640 readers. who contributed to the survey. And essentially, we collected data on their buying habits for the last year, which Tony was actually surprisingly high despite COVID over the last year.
Yeah, so some quick background. I mean, we do these surveys from time to time anyway, and this was a particularly interesting one. Like, we always are interested in what our readers are buying because it helps us understand, which brands are popular with our readers specifically, not just golfers. As you mentioned, right, we really wanted to sort of gauge the impact that COVID had on buying cycles in particular. Because we know it is an absolutely crazy time in terms of buying. Probably safe to say record levels of golf equipment being purchased right now. I think if you reach out to any of the OEMs and ask them what their turnaround times are on custom product right now, it's insane. It's typically over a month.
At least.
Minimum.
Last time I checked anyway, which was a couple of weeks ago, Titleist, which is in pretty good shape, is quoting 20 business days turnaround time on custom. And there are reasons for that. Even if the golf companies have their own products, they don't necessarily have shafts. Shaft companies are kind of back ordered. Grip companies, Golf Pride in particular, is way back ordered, at least was. So,
and like some are not even in existence. Like some's like, nope, can't get it.
Yeah, that temporarily does not even exist. So just kind of a really interesting way of kind of looking at the market as a whole and see, not only what consumers are buying, but how much they're buying, which is just really fascinating to me.
Yep. And if you didn't have a chance to take our survey, feel free to leave a comment below. If you've ordered anything that's on back order, you're still waiting for, we love to get that feedback, understand the market a little bit more. But let's jump into some of the results, guys. It's not a surprise that the market leaders dominated most categories, but what I did find surprising is the order in which they did. Let's look at drivers first. TaylorMade is at the top, which probably not much of a surprise, right?
No, market leaders are market leaders for a reason.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what,
But Ping ranks above Callaway and Cobra, which to us might not be that surprising because Ping has done really well in our most wanted testing. However, those are huge forces that Ping is now starting to outperform according to our readers.
Yeah, I guess a couple things that stand out. First, yeah, Ping is doing better in the driver category than I would have expected. And I do think it is important to point out. The question was, first, have you bought a new driver within the last year? And then the follow-up, which brand did you buy? So that's your background here. And TaylorMade, Ping, Callaway, I mean, I think if I recall, it's 1.5 percentage points between the two of them. And it's really tight. Okay. Ping and Callaway, functionally, you could say tied for second. But yeah, you do see three really strong brands. And again, I'm a little surprised to see Ping as strong as Callaway and TaylorMade in the driver category. But like you said, they've done really well in our testing over the years. And they do really well fitting a range of golfers. So if you struggle with a massive slice, there's a Ping driver for you. If you want something forgiving but that isn't slow and short, they've got a driver for you. If you need to cut a little bit of spin, they dabble in everything but the lightweight category. So like I said, I do a really good job offering something for almost everybody.
How about fairway woods and hybrids, Tony? You found some interesting feedback there.
Yeah, the big thing I would say right out of the gate with the fairway wood, we talk about buying cycles, right? Mm-hmm. Typically, golfers replace their equipment every 3 to 6 years, depending on how avid a golfer they are and what category of club we're talking about. So we assume our readers tend to replace a little more often than a typical golfer, but generally speaking, fairway woods are a once every 5 to 6 year replacement. So you would expect maybe 20% would purchase a new fairway wood in a given year. We're seeing over 40% of the people who took this survey replaced a fairway wood within the last year, which is just an astronomical percentage. That kind of speaks to the health of the industry right now. That's kind of a big number to begin with. And then if we look at the individual breakdown again, Callaway and TaylorMade, by the numbers, Callaway slightly ahead, but again, functionally a tie. And then it's a more significant drop down to Ping and Titleist, and then another step down to Cobra.
Chris, are you surprised to see that many people buying a new fairway wood or hybrid this year?
Yes and no. I think the combination, you may have some, people that are new golfers or people that are newer or maybe pick the game up again and haven't been playing for a while. And part of that is, hey, I'm going to get some new equipment. To me, what's interesting throughout the entire survey is to kind of see where responses tracked with our testing and the places where it deviated from our testing. And so just bouncing back to the drivers real quick, that really tended to follow a lot of our historical testing. Like Tony said, Ping has tested very, very well, right? Historically, Callaway has tested exceptionally well. Obviously, most wanted driver this year, and that's not the first time Callaway's been in that position with us. And so it has followed the performance of the testing. We get down a little bit later in the survey, and we have some places where it deviates from the testing a little bit, but not so much with metalwoods, with one exception. In the hybrid and fairway wood category, I was surprised to see Tour Edge so far toward the bottom. Historically, they've tested pretty well, and I don't know how much this impacts them with putting a lot of their emphasis into PGA Tour champions and kind of an older demographic. If that hasn't necessarily translated as well with the typical MyGolfSpy consumer, because historically their hybrids and fairway woods have performed as good, if not better, than a lot of the market leaders, people that are much higher up on that food chain right now. So that one kind of popped out to me as well.
I would add too, the hybrid piece of it is absolutely fascinating. I was talking to an insider, one of my contacts at an OEM, and he basically said they don't have good data on hybrid replacement cycles. They can tell you, hey, the average turnaround time on a driver is X. Hybrid replacement cycles.
Why would that be?
Well, it turns out that a lot, maybe even a majority of golfers are still playing the first hybrid they ever purchased.
That's why.
So it's sort of like this, almost to a degree, for some golfers, a near infinite lifespan product. And we see this too. Like our hybrid stories get no traction. Nobody seems to care about hybrids. So
I write a lot of those, so I appreciate that.
It's brutal. And like it's some really interesting stuff. Just nobody gives a damn.
One of the interesting things about the hybrid purchases is there's 4 companies where majority of hybrids are sold, and you got your TaylorMade, Ping, Callaway, and Titleist, and that's at like above 15%.
It's about those 4 brands are eyeballing 70% of hybrids, I would say.
Yeah, and then you go one just below 10%, and that's Cobra, and then everything else is like low 4%. It's kind of interesting that those 4 dominate.
But we saw the same thing, whether it was driver, fairway, hybrid, the big 5, right, as they're typically called. And, Cobra tends to be a little smaller than the others in that big 5. But when you look at that, it's TaylorMade, Ping, Callaway, Titleist, Cobra every time for driver, fairway, hybrid. And then it's really interesting that PXG was 6th.
That surprised me.
They were next in line. And again, they're not really sniffing TaylorMade numbers, but consistently getting more responses across the board in the metalwood category, more purchases than you mentioned Tour Edge, right? And Wilson and Mizuno, and pick any other company, right? So, they're not with the big boys yet, but they're climbing the ladder. And I mean, what are they, like 6-7 years old at this point? And they've kind of cracked through in a way that these well-established brands haven't.
Well, right, like you take a Wilson. Like Wilson's always hovered right around kind of a similar market share, right? And if you were to trace the history, right, which we've done a little bit of with PXG, the fact to think that we'd be talking about them as, maybe the leading company of the not 5, and I guess kind of college football analogy, whatever, take out your Power 5 conference, take that and say, okay, what's the absolute best team in college football that isn't one of your Power 5 conferences? And, a couple of years ago, we were talking about what was it, like UCF, like Central Football.
I was just getting ready to say that when UCF said they were the national champions.
Miranda loves football reference.
I was like, yes.
But so PXG's the UCF, where it's like, hey, they can make, and again, people really struggle with some of the hype and hyperbole and the boisterous attitude and all those things with PXG. But bottom line is, it's resonating with people. It's clearly resonating with millions and millions and millions of buyers out there. And you can hate it, like it, whatever. But like you said, the facts are there. It's the best of the next set.
PXG might not be resonating with the wedges though, when it's like 600 a wedge.
Well, yeah, hang on. There was a lot of discounts through COVID with PXG. Do you think that that's part of it? And if they trade back to their old prices?
Sure.
that we continue to see PXG gaining market share? Or do you think that if they go back to their old price model, then, they fall off again?
They have 0211 now, though. So they've diversified.
Okay.
They're going to maintain that 0211 at an affordable price. They're going to have the more premium Gen stuff, which is right now Gen 4. And, again, looking at these charts and talking about trends over time, right? We talk about the Big Five. They've been the Big Five for as long as I can remember. And, they might go like this, but you don't, TaylorMade is not going to be the number 8 brand in any category anytime soon, right? They are, to a large degree, these Big Five effectively flatlined, right? They're, again, a little bit of movement, but they're not jumping all around. And you've seen, again, similarly on the lower end with brands, again, Wilson, Cleveland, to an extent, Torridge. They're flatlining on the lower end of things, not making big moves. And, within, again, since inception, PXG is the company that is moving up. And I would also add, when we look at the direct-to-consumer space and small company space, sub 70 is another one.
This was the other huge one. Yeah.
Yeah, that kind of pops up. And you're like, to look at, granted, hybrid is a who gives a shit category, as much as it pains me to say that, because I think it's a really fascinating category. I think it's something golfers should pay more attention to.
But you also like wedge grinds.
Yeah, I do. So there's a lot of things I feel golfers are not appreciating enough, in my mind anyway. But again, sub 70, kind of a really small, relatively new company. And with our readers to see, their hybrid sales eclipse. And I think the same with the Fairway Woods as well, to see them eclipse brands like Wilson and Cleveland with our readers, and in some cases Torridge. It's like, man, that's surprising.
Do you think that PXG went that way, that started to grow because of their price cuts during COVID?
Hell yeah.
You look at where they are today, and they're kind of hitting on all cylinders now. As Tony mentioned, they're going to have the new generation stuff. So right now it's Gen 4. That's their higher price point. They're going to have the milled wedges. They said they're $650 a pop. Then you have 0211, right? Which, again, at a more friendly price point. Obviously, performance is pretty good. The 0211 driver did exceptionally well in our testing this year. And if I'm not mistaken, I think it actually did a little bit better than the Gen 4 in some regards. Then, now that they're on to a 4th generation, they have liquidation opportunities with remaining Gen 3 stuff, and could continue to sell that in between or whatever price point they want until that's gone and it's ready to kind of recycle Gen 4. And so now they have categories of all these different things where you can't really have a buyer go say, oh, well, I can't afford that, or they don't have anything for me. It's just the opposite. You can't make the excuse now that, hey, they don't have something at a price point commensurate or performance commensurate with that price point as other brands do.
Yeah, and like you said, there are reasons that people won't buy PXG. I get it, right? There's reasons why lots of people don't buy lots of things, but it's very difficult to look at that 0211 lineup, or when COVID hit, when they did the discounting on the Gen 2 and Gen 3 stuff, and say that it's a price argument anymore. Yeah, there's some stuff in the lineup that is going to be too spendy for a lot of people, but they are now at a point where they are price competitive. And I think, as much as we see them climbing the charts here, I don't think Bob is going to, look at this and go, yeah, super psyched to be number 6, brother. Like, that's not going to...
He'll say it like that.
He is not going to be super excited about it, but they're upwardly mobile at this point, which is, not something we see a lot of in the golf company industry, where everybody tends to be relatively flat.
All right, let's move on to irons. I think we've beaten them into submission and into you've got to care about hybrids. So,
damn it.
Right? Last week in our iron discussion for Players Distance, we talked about how Mizuno still seems to do really well, also performs really well with our readers. That came back as true in this survey as well. But Tony, what we found in the iron breakdown of interesting things that we gathered is the type of iron that people are playing, right?
Yeah, so this is one where we asked the question about what type of iron do you have in your bag, what category, so players, distance players, game improvement, that sort of thing. And And I think we've made some assumptions for a long time when we schedule and prioritize our most wanted tests. So it was really surprising to me to see, players' cavity backs at about 35%, by far the most popular category with our readers. Players' distance, which we assumed would be way high, was, only about 18%. SGI, which tends to be a big mover at retail, less than 5% for our readers. Combo sets, which again is another thing I believe strongly in, and I think more golfers should consider, much like a very nice hybrid. Really, again, around 5%. The big one that just blew my mind was blade muscle back, the most unforgiving, difficult, just brutal golf clubs to play. 11% of you bought blades or muscle backs within the last year, and we think that's it's kind of crazy to see that.
Why would that be?
Well, the one thing to keep in mind, again, full context here, 11% of our readers, the market as a whole, blades are maybe 1 to 2%. You are talking our guys going 5x what the market as a whole plays. And we know there's some ego and some goofy shit that goes into that. Like, well, if I hit blades, it makes me a better ball striker and all this stuff. And, we look at what we see in our testing when we knock blades around the facility, where standard deviations of ball speed drop off the planet when you miss a little bit, and you're just like, what are you guys doing? But hey, I guess to each his own.
It doesn't make you a better ball striker, just makes how obvious of a shitty ball striker you are.
Yeah, it when you pure it, I guess. But so I think when you look at that combination of players, irons, and blades, that helps to explain at least why Mizuno was functionally 20% of new iron purchases, which, again, putting everything in context, roughly 2x its market share. So, and we know this, we've said this time and time again, Mizuno strongly over indexes with our readers, but yeah, it's still crazy to see, to think Mizuno in our survey near 20%, and then the actual market leaders, TaylorMade and Callaway, sub 15. So quite a massive gap when our readership's in the iron category.
It's good to see Strixon getting up there too, because I think they're the most underrated company out there when it comes to irons. Like I really think Strixon should be pushing that 10% coming. I think they will. I think they really will. I'm looking to get some new irons this year, and it was between them and Mizuno, and I think I'm just going to go with Strixon again because I love that endo forged iron feel, just like Mizuno, but again, I really like my Strixon, so why change?
No, I think there's a lot there, and it's interesting. I think Strixon has continued to miss a huge opportunity. I think part of the reason they're underrated, and I would agree with you on that, Harry, that they are, particularly in the iron category, is that they have components to the story around their irons that, for whatever reason, they just choose not to tell. Mizuno has done a great job of that over time. I mean, the idea of that nothing feels like a Mizuno, and they've gotten into that and really established a great relationship with their foundry. And Tony could speak more to that because he's been there on site and seen what's going on there. But on the Strixon side, they do work with Endo, which is one of the top 2 or 3 or 4 premier forging houses in the world. And, Endo makes very high-end stuff under its own label as Ippon, a new brand coming out in Japan that we're going to write about here in about a month. Proto Concept, or Proto C, is also an Endo forged product, but they're at a much, much higher price point. You're going to be $300 plus per club head. And it really is in that category of a high-end, Mizuno, Miura, some of these other ones, Fujimoto. You go down the list, PRGR, Yamaha, Yonex, etc. And Strixon should absolutely be in that conversation or seated at that table. And I think they don't do a very good job of putting themselves there, telling that particular part of the story, because there's more people like you, Harry, that would, I think, resonate with that, and people would go, oh, damn, I can get that level of forging, that level of quality for this price point. That's awesome.
I think Chris is right. When you talk about irons, and again, I personally haven't had a ton of experience with Strixon, but I hear the feedback, right? I know guys who play them.
Shame on you, Tony.
I know, but
he's playing hybrids.
Like one of these universally loved products in the iron category. And so, they really should be in the same part of that conversation that Mizuno is in, right? And you know, I think
absolutely.
You talk about those fine forgings, right? When I think of a fine iron forging, I don't think TaylorMade, I don't think Callaway. I think Mizuno. I go to Mizuno first, and you know, Titleist certainly does good work there. And yeah, the next one up is Srixon, and so I think that's a brand that should be elevated, but it is sort of on Srixon to tell that story.
Yeah, and historically, those major companies, Callaway, Titleist, etc., up through certain series, I think it was like maybe 680 with Titleist, Callaway, like the Apex Black, obviously the legacy stuff that that Stenson had played. A lot of those products were endo forged. So when they wanted their high-end premium forging, those companies oftentimes went through endo. And so the reality was that, what was it? TaylorMade, the old rack stuff, like you had the Lehman box toes, those were Miura forged. And so you could go back through and look at these different individual releases. And when they wanted a high-end premium forging, it was Miura, it was endo.
Wasn't Tiger Woods, like when he was on his game, he had, was it endo forged, or it was like...
There's a lot of rumors.
There were some strong Miura rumors, but...
Miura, okay.
Yeah, they weren't being forged out of a large house in Taiwan or China, and you know, as some of the other products, they were taken care of in one regard or the other. So should Srixon be up there? Yeah, absolutely. Are they not telling that story? Like I said, Tony, Japanese companies tend to be a little bit less boastful around some of those things. Again, I'd put Nippon in there from an iron shaft standpoint. They could tell a much larger story, but it's not really in their ethos. It's not in their DNA to jump up in front of others and say, hey, look at us, even though they would have every right to.
That's right. We see that, right? The big five are the ones that beat the loudest drums.
Okay, if we move on to wedges, we actually had something surprising here. Our most wanted winner in 2020, the Honma TW4, it didn't even rank for us. Chris, what do you take away from that?
Yeah, there are two places, like I said, where things kind of deviated from our testing. I thought was interesting. In the iron category, was talked about. Honma was very low again. It's TR20. The P and V series both tested very well. Actually, V did, I believe, was the most wanted in that players category previously. And then you have the wedges, again, that did exceptionally well. What do I make of that? For whatever reason, it didn't resonate with our buyers. I think you flip around and you look at things that maybe ultimately, impacted people's buying decisions. Again, it's hard to get away from Vokey in some of these regards because they do have so many grades.
Well, where do I go to even see a Honma wedge?
Yeah, that's a great point.
If I wanted to even go to a store that's going to put duct tape on the sole and face so that I can actually tell nothing about the performance, where do I go?
No, it's perfect because at our club the last weekend, we had a Titleist fitting day at our club. Well, the more of those events and things that you have, people get there, they get fit. Again, I would much rather have somebody get fit for a wedge by a professional fitter than buy any other wedge off the rack. And so you have more of these opportunities. Titleist has a great process and way of going about that. And so it gets to the fact that you can't just have performance. You have to have distribution. And there's a reality of how you're going to outreach opportunity for people to purchase, try, get fit for certain products. And hey, if I can get fit for that, and again, Vokey's ubiquitous, right? Like there isn't a retail store it isn't in. If you're going to get fit for wedges, they're probably going to carry Vokey, right? And so that doesn't surprise me at all that Vokey was number one in that regard. But, to me, it speaks of the distribution, like Tony said, and the availability, access to those products.
Harry, do you think it's an accessibility problem or just that it's not one of the Power 5 brands and, they're just always fighting an uphill battle?
I would say wedges is a little bit of a niche. I think if you're a brand loyalist and you want to go with Callaway or whatever, I think the wedges is the ones that starts to give, just purely because you see a lot of people on tour that use Vokey. You see them in the stores all around the country. You see that and you see Cleveland. When it comes to Callaway, you see them, but they're sometimes in the picture. They're not always in the picture. TaylorMade's kind of the same way, in my opinion. Even though that we test them and we know that it's a good wedge, everyone's going to be like, well, Honma, I didn't even know they had a wedge, All
right, let's move on and wrap this up with putters. Tony, what surprised you?
Wedges and putters, in both categories, we had a Costco Kirkland sighting. So that's
All right.
Get it?
that's pretty wild to see both both categories. The Costco creeping up over 1%, which is again more than we can say about some of the more established brands. Odyssey number one, not a super big surprise by any stretch, but that they were so much ahead of Scotty Cameron caught me a little bit by surprise. But the one that really borderline shocked me was TaylorMade, a very strong third. I mean, really, almost 8 or so percentage points ahead of Ping and Even Roll, and these brands that historically have tested well. Though I should mention, like TaylorMade putters have tested really well for us over the years as well. So that one was certainly surprising to see TaylorMade there. Hey, credit to them, strength of the Spider lineup, etc. But yeah,
I would love to find out what the other is. Like all of those little brands that come into this, that'd be an interesting one.
Yeah, and I mean, we kind of got nichey. I mean, we had small putter companies on listed, to say the least. So, I mean, we can go back through and see, but you do get some obscure stuff for sure, especially in the putter category. So
That's because Barba took the survey.
yeah, lab putters above 1%, and sometimes it's things where people just don't read all the choices. So you're like, hey, what brand of putter did you purchase most recently? And then they'll select other and type in Mizuno. Like, it's right there. Like, we had a box for that.
Surprising to see that Wilson is not up there as high as I thought, because they make a solid putter at a bang for your buck price. That is like
every year.
Every single year. Every year, dude, they're up there. And they do really, really well. Maybe it's the name. I really don't know, but there should be a lot more people playing that putter because it's a solid putter line.
Did Tommy Armour rank on any of the putter stuff? I don't have it.
Yeah, so again, I mean, again,
like 2.5%, 3%.
It's a functional tie between Wilson, Tommy Armour, and Mizuno. All about that, 2 points something or 1 point,
So again, outperforming, I guess, kind of outkicking your coverage, so to speak, right? Like they, I put Tommy Armour there. The other thing that was interesting to me about the putters was we've seen this shift away from blades and towards mallets in some regard, just in terms of the type of putter you use. And I think a lot of that has to do with, once upon a time, if you had any type of stroke that wasn't like kind of straight back, straight through, and you didn't want big, heavy perimeter weighted putters, you had to go with a blade, right? You didn't really have an option for somebody like Tony that has a really strong arcing stroke, or even someone like me that has more of a mid arc on my stroke. And now you do, right? There's all these different hosel options. Mentioned Even Roll in there, coming in at number 5. That was surprising to me that it still continued to resonate that highly with our readers, but they have a lot of different options. So now if you had something that previously was really only satisfied by a blade type putter, a stroke that would fit that, that's not the case anymore. So you can get kind of the best of both worlds and get some of that additional stability and features of the mallet putter. Even if you have a strong arcing stroke or a mid arcing stroke, you don't need to stick with the blade anymore. And so I think that's part of the reason we're possibly seeing some of that shift too.
Mm.
Yeah, it's roughly 53 to 47% of the putter purchases by our readers were mallets. And, I'm confident that if we had asked that same question probably even 5 years ago, the numbers would have been at least reversed, maybe even more strongly favoring blades.
60-40, yeah.
Yeah, so again, I think you're exactly right on the reasons, this idea that mallets have evolved now. And, I haven't found a mallet that works for my excessively strong arc, but,
You're an outlier in so many ways, Tony.
We're
You should try the sick putter. The sick putter has a really strong toe down.
I may be the only guy to ever put a Ventus Black in a 5 hybrid. So we'll see.
Yeah, you're going to be playing the full hybrid bag here soon. It'll be like the 4 brid, 5 brid, 6 brid, 7 brid.
I mean, my iron game sucks. If I can eliminate all irons from my bag, I'd shave strokes. So
SGI, baby.
All right, I want to bring this discussion full circle and remind everyone that this was a survey of our readers. And I'm wondering, guys, how do you think that results might differ in the golf community as a whole? I mean, do you think that the information we got is reflective of the larger community and it might represent a shift in brand perceptions, or do you think we see different results?
I think in terms of,
That's a good question.
Mizuno being the outlier in the iron category, but otherwise I think brand wise, we largely mirror the market as a whole. I would say, the two things that stand out to me about our readers, and I can't be certain about this, but there's strong suggestions of this in the data. Our reader is going to be more likely to replace his clubs more often than the typical golfer. I think we can say that confidently. And then the other piece is just looking at the iron category part of it. We grossly over index in the blade category, and probably equally as grossly, if not more grossly, under index in the SGI category. So I think, you could probably at least flip those two, and you'd be closer to a representation of the market. Even then we'd probably be high for blade usage and low for SGI.
Yeah, I think the other place too, Miranda, to point that out is you take a company, I'll mention Sub 70 again, where we talk often about there being, call it 24, 25 million golfers. Of that, roughly 6 to 7 million tend to handle the majority of the purchasing every year. When you talk about that market at large, in a large regard, we're talking about that 6 to 7 million golfers. Well, there's another 18 or so million golfers out there that don't necessarily or haven't historically driven a lot of these numbers. So the opportunity for a company like a Sub 70, maybe Tour Edge in there as well, or some of these other direct-to-consumer companies, that part of the market, that 16 to 18 million people that, again, kind of buy golf clubs more the way that I would buy a pair of jeans, right? Like, I want to get in, get out. I got 3 questions. Does it fit? Will it last a while? Does it look reasonably decent? Good. Give me 3 pairs and I'm out. People that buy golf clubs like that, the opportunity for a Sub 70 is absolutely huge moving forward. So how they continue to grow and move into that space of that other 18 million golfers is something that I'm going to be very, very intrigued to watch moving forward. And we don't know.
Harry, what do you think? Are these results reflective of the golf community as a whole? You play with a lot of different people in a lot of different arenas. Is this what you're seeing in your competitors' bags?
I'm seeing a lot of mixture, to be honest. I mean, it depends on what golf course you go to. I go to a couple, I go to my country club. I go to a municipal course around the corner, and I'm seeing like Tomiyama 845s from back in the day. Like, they haven't changed it. I'm seeing a Big Bertha Steelhead, a whole array of clubs that should be on a wall, basically.
Yeah.
And then I go to my country club, and I think it would be an interesting question to pose next year. Am I a part of a country club, or am I like a municipal kind of course? Just to see if there's any correlation between, hey, if I can afford a membership, or I like to be part of a club, I should say, is my bag going to be updated more?
Based on my experience, no.
No. I mean, it's so interesting, but it would be, because there's definitely, like, I think about people in my course where it's like, you'll pay X $1,000 to join a course, and you'll pay X $100 per month, and you'll do that, and then you look in their bag and it's like, you must have spent all your money on everything else, because you won't pay the $1,500 then to update your set of irons. Now, the other hand, there's people that are like, they'll show up to the demo day and they'll say, hey, I'm buying a driver from you. Let's just find one that fits.
Yeah.
And, I can't prove this. I have zero data for this. So let me be clear about it. But my hunch is, right, if you're a member of a club, for the most part, right, there's always a competitive aspect to it, whether it's a club championship or even a Saturday morning Nassau, right? There's always something on the line,
or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah. And so with that in mind, my hunch is that it's a class of golfer that is more likely to spend money on lessons than on equipment. That's just a hunch. No proof.
I still think you should bring back the series, Tony, where you did like Tuesday night league or Wednesday night.
I'm going
league,
to. That's
you
coming
just did
back.
Like random what's in the bag.
What's in the bag is coming back.
I can't tell you how much I enjoyed. I look forward to that every week. I'm glad to hear that.
Like the dude that we found had 2 6 hybrids.
Yeah, it was great. It was awesome.
All right, guys, lots of interesting information that can be taken away from this survey. And if you're a golfer out there, you're curious what to put in your bag, you want to see what other golfers are putting in their bag, whether there are readers or not, this is great information for you, giving you a little bit more buying power. So if you want to take a look at the results, here's a link to the article here. Again, like I said last week, we talked about irons and Mizuno and their performance. Here's a link to last week's video. Remember, we're here every Tuesday. Don't forget to engage with us, comment, like, subscribe. We can't wait to hear what you think. We out. Tony, here's the question I know everyone listening wants to know. Who ranks 1, 2, and 3 currently in Ball Lab quality control results?